awkward on this computer, and here we go. So welcome. This is the introduction to emotional freedom techniques. I wanted to expand on the little half-an-hour session that I did with you for the International Women's event. I'll still move fairly quickly so we can get to the actual tapping part, but know that this also usually comes with a PDF of how to put together the tapping setup statements and such. So I will get that out to Molly. I'll also include it in the YouTube link when I give the link out to the class. That way everybody can access it and find it. So don't get too frantic about taking notes. Just absorb and understand what it is that we're going through today. So I've been an EFT practitioner for 3 or 4 years now, but I've been doing healing work similar to this, like classical homeopathy and body work, for 23 years now. So I wrote a book called The Touch Crisis, and really one of my passions is to help people connect more clearly in the communities, within themselves, within their partnerships. So that's what I work with a lot. Today I want you to understand, when I use the word EFT, or when you hear tapping, right? Emotional freedom techniques and EFT are the same thing. It's a type of tapping that has a lot of research behind it to show the benefits, to really create powerful change in your life. And this is how I want you to think about using it, is where in your life do you feel like I'm having these cravings, or I'm having these fears, or I'm really frustrated emotionally about these things, right? I have an emotional hesitation or emotional thing that's holding me back. That's when EFT tapping is really amazing. Today, we're going to learn how to structure EFT for ourselves, but I also want to clearly delineate when you should use a professional, whether that be a professional EFT practitioner or another counselor or a therapist. We'll go through that as well. So tapping is a series of techniques, right? Emotional freedom techniques has an S because as a practitioner, I have about 10 or 15 different techniques that I use for different things. So for how I work with trauma and abuse is very different than how I work with frustrations with your partner, is very different with how I work with cravings, is very different with how I work with fears. Although that can all be addressed, not the trauma parts, but the rest of it can be addressed with the basic, which is what I'm going to teach you today. So it's a nice overview tool for you to have in your toolbox to use whenever you need. So one study has found that EFT reduces stress hormone cortisol by 37% and decreases anxiety by 40%. And we find this consistently in studies, that it's as powerful as a lot of other therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, but it can also work more quickly because it helps us see a situation from a newer and a healthier perspective. My slides are going forward, right? Because every once in a while they get stuck and the audience can't see. So if you can't see that my slides are going forward, let me know. EFT has been beneficial for reducing, discharging, or neutralizing emotions around current, past, and future events, which we'll talk about more clearly in a minute. Controlling and eliminating cravings, decreasing physical discomfort, reducing and eliminating fears and phobias, and helping people find blocks behind their affirmations or their goals. So when you want to work with a professional, with an EFT practitioner or a counselor or a therapist of some type, is if you've witnessed or experienced a really terrifying event, or you have severe anxiety, nightmares, flashbacks, a history of abuse, if something's really emotionally overwhelming, you don't want to use tapping for that situation. So you can still tap on cravings, you can still tap on frustrations at work, you can still tap on other things, but don't try to access those big things by yourself without some kind of professional support. Okay. If you're also doing this and you're not seeing results, so you start tapping at home, and this happens sometimes in the classes where people don't quite understand how to put together a setup statement, or they're not going quite underneath the problem enough to see good results. So if you're not seeing results, if this isn't feeling effective for you, I offer everybody a free session, free half-an-hour session with me. So that way you can find more clarity and make this a powerful tool for yourself. So EFT is supposed to help you find calm and clarity, because when you're not in a place of fear or anxiety or frustration or feeling depressed or feeling grief or feeling all these things, which are normal emotions, but we don't want to get stuck in them. So if we're stuck in them, we use EFT to help us find that calm and clarity. And once we do that, the brain is amazing. It'll start coming up with all these resources, all these ways to fix the problem, all these ways where it's okay, right? We have this internal healing so we can come from a place of confidence and choice. So to do a successful setup statement, which is really the core of how you'll put together an EFT session together, there's 4 components. Number 1, you're going to identify a specific event in time. And that can be right now, past, or future. So an event is just a situation. The one I use all the time when I tap with people, or as an example, when I'm talking about an event, past, right? A past event could look something like, let's say I'm talking about my fear of finances, right? If I just talk about fear of finances and try to tap on that, my brain is going to come up of all the 5 times I've had financial problems, past, present, and future. So it's going to remember that time when I was 4 and I couldn't buy something I wanted, and the time I was 20 and I couldn't pay my car payment, and right now when I don't have enough money in my account, and thinking in the future, how am I going to pay that bill, right? So all of that comes up if I'm just talking about my finances. That's too much for the brain to handle. And we're not going to make any permanent change in our emotional state or be able to have more clarity unless we work on something really specific. So a specific event can be any of those things I said. So instead of the fear of finances, it's very specific. It is that time when I was 20 and I couldn't pay my car payment. The time when I was 13, I had to borrow $5 from my friend's mom because I forgot my lunch money. Right? Sitting right now and looking at my bank statement, or thinking about paying that bill in the future. So next week, knowing I have to pay that bill and I don't have enough money in my account, right? Sorry, that ringer is supposed to be off. I unplugged it yesterday and I forgot I plugged it in this morning to use the phone. Anyway, then you want to think about how you feel thinking about the event right now. So I can't change how I felt when I was 20. I can't change how I felt when I was 4, but I can change how I feel about it right now, right? And our brain has that link of what that emotion was then and now. I'm going to unplug that because if it keeps ringing like it does. All right. Sorry about that. We get a bunch of spam calls and they'll call like 5 times in a row. So, okay. So let's say I'm talking about that time when I was 20. I might have been embarrassed when I was 20 that I couldn't pay my car payment, right? And now I'm like feeling a little bit of disappointment in myself. Like, why wasn't I more responsible when I was 20, right? So the emotion can be very different, and we want to focus on how we feel right now. And then also where in our body we're feeling it. So sometimes you won't feel anything in your body. And if you don't feel anything, just skip this part of it, right? If you scan your body and like there's nothing there, then you're just going to do the event, how you feel, and the strength. But often our body stores our emotional situations in our body, right? So you get a sickness to your stomach, you get a tightness in your chest, you get a pain in your shoulder, you start holding your neck funny, or maybe it's a pain in your low back. It can be something as innocuous as a little twinge in your pinky toe, right? So wherever it is, just trust that. Okay. So once again, identifying the event, you want it to be as specific and detailed as possible. If I can't picture what happened when you describe it, it's probably, not specific enough. So in other words, you want something that somebody would be able to visualize if you told them what the event was, what the situation was. And once again, if it's overwhelming, traumatic, if you're having problems clearing it, then have someone help you. So just another example, fighting with my partner, right? You think about all the times you fought with your partner. But if you think about fighting over money, okay, but what about that was really bothersome for you? Well, my partner told me I was irresponsible. Okay, that's the thing. How does it feel when your partner says you're irresponsible with money? Well, it makes me feel sad in my chest, or it makes me feel angry in my stomach, or whatever it is, right? So that's the event and the place and all of that. Are there any questions before I move on? So grab a pen and paper and just write down an event that's happened recently, a situation that's happened recently, or that's going to happen in the future. And write down what that event is. So really specifically, what is the event? Where do you feel it? And then how strong is the emotion around it? So we rate the strength of the emotion from 0, meaning it's not strong, all the way up to 10, meaning it's overwhelming. And the reason why we do that is because it helps us evaluate if the EFT tapping is working for us. I know my slide's a little far forward for what we're doing. This is kind of what you're doing, right? The event, how you feel thinking about it, where in your body, how strong is it? Okay, so that's the first part of your second set of your setup statement. The second half of your setup statement is a self-acceptance phrase. So we look at, yes, this happened, or this is going to happen, or I'm feeling this right now, right? But everything's going to be okay. Right? So the self-acceptance phrase should be present. It should be right now, and it should be as detailed as possible. Cool. So the one we use most often in EFT is I deeply and completely accept myself. But sometimes we don't accept ourselves. Maybe we feel guilty, or there's a little bit of shame, or there's a little bit of whatever, right? We're told it's not okay to accept ourselves about certain things. So then we can move that a little bit. Like, I'm open to accepting how I feel. I'm open to accepting myself. I'm open to accepting the situation, right? Or I accept I feel this way. So even though I'm angry, thinking about the fight with my sister 2 weeks ago, I accept I feel angry. I accept I feel this way. Okay. So write down a setup statement that resonates for you, or the self-acceptance phrase that resonates for you under your setup statement, just for your own kind of knowledge. And when we do our setup statement, when we do the tapping, we always are going to start on the side of the hand. So the full setup statement that you wrote will be addressed while you're tapping the side of your hand and repeated 3 times. So for example, if let's say I'm talking about that, fight with my sister 2 weeks ago, it would look like, even though I feel sadness in my stomach, right? So the emotion in the body part, thinking about fighting with my sister 2 weeks ago, that's the event. Right? I deeply and completely accept myself. And then I'd say that 2 more times. Even though I feel sadness in my stomach, thinking about fighting with my sister 2 weeks ago, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I feel sadness in my stomach, thinking about fighting with my sister 2 weeks ago, I deeply and completely accept myself. Okay. So that's your setup statement. And this is the kind of the, I don't want to say the most important part, but it can be a key component when you're doing the deeper self work, to really looking at that situation and what's coming up when you think about it. Okay? Any questions on what I've said so far? If so, unmute or throw it in the chat. Okay. So all the rest of the points are just what we call a reminder phrase. So it's the emotion in the body part that we're feeling it. So after we've done this 3 times, the next point, everybody could try it, it's top of the head. And in this example, I'd say sadness in my stomach, right? The emotion and the body part. The next spot is at the eyebrow. And once again, just like the hand, which I didn't say before, you can tap one side, you can tap the other side. It doesn't matter which side you're tapping. You can tap both if that feels more comfortable to you. Once again, I'd say sadness in my stomach, right? The emotion, the body part. The next spot is right at the temple, side of the eye. Sadness in my stomach, and emotion body part. Then right on the cheekbone, right underneath the eye. Sadness in my stomach. The next spot is under the nose and above the lip. Sadness in my stomach. The next spot is between the lip and the chin. Sadness in my stomach. And then the collarbones. So if you look underneath your collarbones, or feel, you don't have to look, underneath your collarbones to the side of your sternum, right? Just that soft spot there. So just find that soft spot wherever it is for you. It may be tender, it may not be. This is a point we tend to use both sides at the same time. So you can use both hands. If you only have one hand accessible, you can use one hand, right? Some people just like to slap their whole chest, kind of tap the whole thing. Whatever feels most comfortable. Sadness in my stomach, right? Emotion body part. The last spot is side of the arm. If you find your armpit, kind of right at the nipple line, right where your brow line is for women. Sadness in my stomach. And if it feels uncomfortable to reach across your body, you can do it same side. Once again, one-sided, two-sided, doesn't matter. Okay. So that is one full round, all the way from side of the hand all the way through these points. At the end of each round, you just pause, take a breath. You can take some water if you have some. And now here's where we evaluate how successful was this round, how successful was this tapping for you this time. So you should see a change in the level of your emotional intensity. So let's say I started at a level 7 of sadness in my stomach with my sister. I should see that change. So maybe now it's a 3 or a 4. Maybe it went up a little bit because I'm allowing myself to feel the sadness. So if it goes up, and that can happen, especially if you've had to suppress something, like maybe it wasn't safe to feel anger, maybe it wasn't safe to express certain emotions. So those can be buried very, very deep. So then as they start coming up, the intensity can go up. If that happens, just keep tapping through all the points until it starts dropping again. And you can use this setup statement again and go through it that way, right? Or if you're just starting to feel it, like, wow, I'm really feeling the sadness. I'm really feeling sad in my stomach, 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 right? I can just keep looping until I feel that calm come over me. Right? Till it feels easy, till I feel like I'm in my body. So use that as a tool to calm. And when you're working with other people, kids, clients, right? You don't have time to do a full setup statement and all that. So you can actually just have them say, hey, just look at me and let's just tap together, right? Or maybe they can't look at you for whatever reason, right? And that's fine. So just tap the points that I'm tapping on. If you have someone that has tactile sensitivity, right? Some people on the autism spectrum, that kind of thing, they can just rub the points. So it's okay to just rub points. I worked with an autistic woman who not only couldn't tap, right? So she just rubbed the points, but she couldn't touch certain parts of her head. So if there's parts that somebody can't touch, they don't like touching, that's fine. Just skip those points because you'll still get an effect using as much of this as you can in the moment. So I kind of went a little bit off track, I got a little ahead of myself there. But so let's step back for a moment. So for every round, you want to see either a change in the intensity of emotion. So it might go up, but most often it goes down. So my sadness in my stomach, thinking about fighting with my sister, might have gone down from a 7 down to a 3 or a 4, right? Rubbing feels more effective for me. Yes, great. Yeah, play with that. Lovely. Sometimes the level of the intensity doesn't go, but there's a shift in the emotion, or you feel like there's not a change, right? So maybe my sadness completely went away and now I'm actually angry at my sister. So sometimes that happens where, because we have multiple emotions about every event, about every situation, it's not like I just feel sad or I just feel angry or I just feel frustrated or I just feel, whatever, annoyed. I can have multiple emotions in a situation. So sometimes that sadness might go away and now my anger comes up. Like, wow, now I'm not sad anymore. I'm actually angry. And my anger is at a level 7. And then tune in. Where do I feel the anger in my chest? Okay, so now I do a whole nother round. Even though I feel anger in my chest, thinking about fighting with my sister 2 weeks ago, right? So we're doing the same process over and over, but after every round, we're reevaluating. We're looking back at that situation. What is true about that situation now? What do I feel? How strong do I feel it? Where is it in my body? So you'd like to, for each situation, get your emotional intensity down to a 0. So now when I think about, so now I've tapped on the sadness, I've tapped on the anger. Maybe I need to tap on those things 2, 3, 4 times. And I want to tap till I can think about that fight with my sister and be like, I'm disappointed that we fought, but I'm okay with it. Right? That's kind of where you want to be, is to not still be emotionally challenged or emotionally triggered when you think about something from the past or the future. Okay. And as I mentioned, the situation can be right now. So if I'm looking at my computer, I'm trying to print something up, the printer's not working, I'm super frustrated because I have to leave to go to work, or I have to give these handouts to my clients or do this paperwork, but my printer is not working and I'm super frustrated. It can literally be, even though right now I'm feeling frustrated that my printer's not working and I feel it in my chest, I deeply and completely accept myself. Okay. So, do you ever move in a fluid line between the points? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. So if you could clarify that question. So when we do the whole process, we'll do a full thing together. But yes, normally it's like you're doing the thing and then you just tap all the points in a row while you're saying the thing, not the event, and addressing everything. If you, once again, if you do not have a setup statement to use, you can just tap in the moment, like massaging from head to eyebrow to tempo. I see what you mean. So like, do you ever just kind of like work through the points like this? Yeah. You can do that for sure. It's not technically like the emotional freedom techniques process, but it's an adaptation of the tools. So if that works for you and it combines in kind of that self-care of massage and of rubbing, and it brings your energy down and it helps you feel your body, go ahead and try it. Yeah. So I wouldn't call it emotional freedom techniques, but it would be helpful. Yeah, great. You're welcome. So now we're going to practice together. And what I'm going to have you do is just repeat after me everything that I'm saying, just so you get kind of the flow of how this works. Okay. And once again, if you're rubbing instead, go ahead and do whatever works for you. So we start the side of the hand. Once again, it doesn't matter what hand you're starting with. Okay. So even though I feel anger in my chest, and just repeat after me, tap the same points. Thinking about the fight with my sister 2 weeks ago, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I feel anger in my chest, thinking about fighting with my sister 2 weeks ago, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I feel anger in my chest, thinking about fighting with my sister 2 weeks ago, I deeply and completely accept myself. This anger in my chest, this anger in my chest, great, side of the eyes, anger in my chest, under the eyes, anger in my chest, under the nose, anger in my chest, under the mouth, anger in my chest, collarbones, anger in my chest, and under the arm, anger in my chest. So we all take a deep breath. You can have some water if you've got some. So this is the part in the sequence where you'd stop and you'd pause, and now you'd reevaluate, looking at your situation. Has the level changed of emotion, the intensity? Has the emotion itself changed, or has the body part changed? If nothing has changed at all, then we need to look at your setup statement and make some adjustments. So it could be that it's too broad. Like, even though the setup statement, even though fighting with my sister seems really specific, it could be that it wasn't about the fight overall. It could be something that she said in the fight. Like, maybe she called me stupid, or maybe she told me I was acting just like mom, or maybe she told me, something that's like, okay, so the event isn't about the fight. The event is, even though my sister, when I think about my sister calling me stupid while we were fighting 2 weeks ago, I accept how I feel. Right? Even though I feel anger in my chest that my sister called me stupid 2 weeks ago, I accept how I feel. Okay. Is that clear? All right, so let's do just one more quick round just to get that thing, and we'll just use that example. So even though I feel anger in my chest, thinking about my sister calling me stupid 2 weeks ago, I deeply and completely accept how I feel. Even though I feel anger in my chest, thinking about my sister calling me stupid 2 weeks ago, I deeply and completely accept myself. So even though I feel anger in my chest, thinking about my sister calling me stupid 2 weeks ago, I deeply and completely accept myself. So top of the head, anger in my chest. And yes, anger in my chest. Side of the eyes, anger in my chest. 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 So take a breath. And I want you to look at the event, the situation that you wrote down when we originally started working together today. And just out of curiosity, I want you to notice if, when you think about your original event, if you had a change in the emotion, the intensity, or the location of it, thinking about it now. And drop your answer into the chat, see if anything's changed. So often people see some kind of change because we have what's called a level of borrowing benefits, right? Where our brain makes sense of the world. Perfect. Someone went from a 7 to a 5. Our brain makes sense of the world by putting things, to be simple, to putting things in little buckets, right? So there's the bucket of, what I think about my finances. There's the bucket of what I think about myself. There's the bucket of arguing with my sister. There's the bucket of the time I, had to go to this school from 6 to 7. So someone went up a little bit, okay? So keep tapping on, go and tap on your event once we're done. So all of these buckets is how our brain makes sense of the world, right? It's how we filter what's coming through and how we filter what's important and not important to us. So when we work with emotional freedom techniques, we are actually working on more things than just the situation that we're thinking of. Does that make sense? So for example, we kind of call it a tabletop, and I should put this slide in here and I keep forgetting. So let's say you've got this tabletop, right? This idea that I'm not good enough, right? So we call that kind of like a table. It's a belief system. It's something that we were taught perhaps, or that we learned over time. Well, underneath that table, holding it up, are all these legs of all these events, all these situations that tell us I'm not good enough, right? So there's the time my mom didn't look at my drawing when I was 3 because she was busy cooking dinner, right? And the time I didn't do really well on my spelling test. And the time the kid at the playground stole my teddy bear and told me I was stupid. And the time I beat myself up because I procrastinated too long on that project, or the time I lost that boyfriend or that girlfriend because of whatever reason, right? So all of these things tell me I'm not good enough. And now I'm walking through the world with this, my brain saying, well, you're not really good enough. You can't succeed at that. You can't have that. You don't deserve that. Of course they're above you. Of course they get to treat you like that, right? But it's completely subconscious. We don't think these things. Well, sometimes we do, right? So by tapping on each one of these events, each one of these situations, we can actually break the whole table. So now we believe we're good enough because we've cleared this idea that, that boyfriend, that we weren't good enough for that boyfriend. Now all of a sudden our brain goes, actually, we're good enough for him, and thank goodness that he left. Right? And that time you were 3, your brain goes, oh, that's right, she was cooking dinner. So of course she didn't have time to pay attention to you. And even the things that you were actually wronged on, right? Where the kid at the playground told you were stupid, someone treated you inappropriately, even those things clear with EFT. So it helps collapse that belief system that you're not good enough. Okay. Because even like the example of, let's say, fighting with my sister. Well, why was I fighting in the first place? So once I work on that fight with my sister, what about whatever our interaction was caused us to fight? Like, were we clashing about politics and we couldn't listen to each other clearly? Or did I feel that she was dominating me? So I was trying to protect myself and not let her dominate me. And I felt like I was, so there's all these reasons why we engage with people around different emotional situations. Does that make sense? So when we start looking at this deeper level of emotional freedom techniques and we really start clearing these things, it allows us to move forward in life. Like, so for example, one of the clients I work with that I have permission to talk about, she came to me because she wanted to reconnect with her husband. After they had kids, they got so busy, all this stuff happened, job, and she just felt like he didn't really care for her anymore. He didn't want to spend time with her, but then he'd want to get intimate with her, and she was like, ugh. But she was like, but I want to feel connected. Right? So we used tapping to clear those situations that kept her feeling separate from her partner, from her husband in her situation. Right? Also, another one I have permission to talk about, my mom has been afraid of heights for 63 years, 64 years. So after 5 sessions, we tapped on her fear of heights, and we had her think about times that she was standing on a cliff, or times she thought, her grandkids were going to run over the edge, or the time my sister and I played a joke on her when we were young and we jumped off this wall because we saw this ledge underneath and she didn't know it was there. So we pretended to fall and it freaked her out. And we thought it was hilarious. I didn't realize I was traumatizing my mom at the time, right? So we worked on these things together. And by the end of these sessions, she was able to stand on the edge of a cliff fully confident and capable without fear. So this is how powerful, and that kind of thing holds. So this is how powerful emotional freedom techniques can be. And hers linked to her dad died by falling off a roof. And she had no concept that her dad dying by falling off a roof could be the cause of her fear of heights. Right? Because sometimes it's not even something that traumatic. Sometimes it's like something we saw when we were on a show, like, Bugs Bunny, we're watching Bugs Bunny and Wile E. Coyote falls off the cliff and turns flat. And for some reason, our brain picks that up as something dangerous, right? So it doesn't even have to be a quote unquote true trauma in order to set up these patterns of fear inside of our body. So are there any questions? So now I want to readdress a little bit. So now that you know how to do the full technique, I also want to take just a couple minutes to teach you how to use it in other ways in your life. So, for example, when you're I mentioned like when you're in the moment, Right? Let's say you're fighting with somebody, or your printer breaks down, or you're getting ready to do a presentation for a grant, you're getting ready to work with a client that you know is challenging, you're getting ready to have a tough conversation with a friend or a partner or a coworker. Emotions can come up, right? And when those emotions come up, it can prevent us from being really clear in the moment, because now we start speaking out of fear or out of frustration or out of anger or out of feeling unwanted or whatever it is in the moment. So when you're actually getting ready, you can do the full setup statement, right? Like, even though when I think about going to have that tough conversation with my husband tonight, or with my wife, or with my partner, or with my best friend, right? Whoever it is, I deeply and completely accept how I feel. Even though I feel anxiety in my chest, thinking about having that tough conversation with my friend tonight, I deeply and completely accept how I feel, right? So then we can do the whole thing. But let's say you're driving there. You can't really do the whole thing while you're driving, but you can just tap. So you can be tapping, just using one hand and just breathing, because the moment of feeling the emotion, like if you're feeling the emotion while you're driving to that, like, yeah, you're not working on the actual situation of the conversation, but you're working on right now. Right now, I'm driving to have this conversation and I'm feeling nervous. I can feel I'm nervous. I'm not breathing deep, right? So you can just tap or rub while you're driving. Right? And you don't have to do all the points. Doing all the points is the most effective. It's how we do our research, right? It's what's been evaluated. But if you only have the time and the space to do a couple of points, like if you just want to drive down the road and only do this point, then just do that and just breathe into it. Because the more often you're doing the full technique, also the more, okay, bye. The more often you're doing the full technique, also the more powerful those moments are going to be. There's also more, like, we call it stealth tapping. So maybe I'm in the middle of an argument, I can feel, or I'm getting criticized by my boss and I feel something, like I feel anger, I can't express it at the moment. You can actually just rub, like we talked about before. So you can just think about it. So maybe I'm rubbing this point under here and I'm rubbing this point under here, and like, oh, that's a really interesting idea that you have, right? Or I'm sorry that I didn't do XYZ the way that you thought. Or, okay, I accept we're getting new software in the busiest time of our year, whatever it is, right? So you can actually just use it in the moment. It's kind of interesting, right? When we get stressed out, what do a lot of people do, right? They rub here, right? Like, oh my gosh, like around their eyes. So naturally, even, we want to hit some of these points, like on an unconscious level, to help regulate our nervous system, to help calm our brain down, to help bring that body from fight, flight, which is what happens when we get emotional, right? We can get in the fight, flight, freeze stage. The cortisol, the stress hormone levels rise. And by using the EFT, it helps bring all of that back down. So we have that calm and clarity and choice. So when you're in a stressful situation, you can use this. So I had a client who was triggered by wearing masks. And so she'd do the work at home, but then when she was in the store doing masks, she'd walk around and she'd just rub her chest a little bit, right? Or she'd just tap the side of her hand. If you're on a Zoom call, you can also tap your fingertips together. Or this is another one when you're standing in front of somebody, right? You can just have your hands just dropped in front of you where nobody can see them or no one's paying attention. And you can tap your fingertips together. Okay. So there's a lot of tested points for emotional freedom techniques. The one I taught you in basic is the one that they use for most of the research. But if you look online, there's tons of different ways. And I use them too in different techniques. Sometimes I use eye movement. Sometimes I use side of different fingers and such. So just know that you're not doing it wrong if you skip a couple things, or if you rub instead of tap. Right? I want you to feel empowered to use this tool in the best way possible for you, because it's a really magnificent tool to help you have that confidence and clarity and choice right? Which we all need every once in a while. So the best way to do this is daily. Just every morning or every night or over your lunch break or while you're in the shower, while you're driving, just tap on something recent. So if you're driving home from work, maybe before you have that transition from work to your family, you want to tap on something that was stressful about the day. So even though I'm feeling still a little bit sad that that client had their meltdown today and I couldn't help them in the way I wanted to, I deeply and completely accept myself, right? You do a few rounds until it gets down to 3 or under, right? I prefer it to get to 0 every time you do a round, or every time you do a series, but at least get it to 3 or under before you stop. You know, some people use it when they're sleeping, like before they go to bed. Some people use it when they wake up, like, oh my gosh, even though I feel so overwhelmed that I have so much to do today, I don't even feel like I have time for tapping, but I accept how I feel. So even though I'm so overwhelmed, I've got so much to do today. Okay, so you can use it that way. What else was I going to say about that? It just came in and came out of my brain super fast. Anyway, I'm sure it'll come back. But if you skip a day, no big deal, right? But the more often you use it, then when you do just like sit and talk to somebody and rub a couple points, your brain will be like, oh, this thing, I know what this is. Just like when you're doing breath work or meditation or yoga or exercise or anything on a regular basis, right? You get those nerve pathways stronger. So it becomes more automatic. Your body is more ready to react to it. So I wanted to just give you a special offer. I do this for all my classes. If you are having challenges or if you're curious about other ways that you can use EFT for yourself, I'll give a 30-minute complimentary health and healing strategy session. To do that, you can go to my website, touchremedies.com. You look for health and healing strategy session, and just there's a Calendly link, so you can book yourself whenever it works for you, or feel free to call me or text me. Same thing if you're having challenges setting up your EFT setup statements, because I really want you to use this. It's a really, really cool, powerful tool. And I want you to be able to use it with your clients if they're having emotional challenges, which, like I said, can just look like, hey, let's just tap together. I know you're feeling really stressed out right now, so let's just tap a little bit. Let's just breathe, right? And have them tap on themselves. It can actually be triggering to tap on somebody else. Although I have done it, like my little nephew, when he'd throw temper tantrums, I'd reach over, I'd just tap on the top of my head, and he'd be like, and he'd give me his grumpy little look, and finally he'd calm down and do whatever it was, at least not without screaming. So you can use it in those ways. So just know that you can guide people through the tapping points without having to go through the whole rigmarole, especially younger kids or people that have some mental challenges may not have the capacity to do that. All right. So my favorite quote, healing may not be so much about getting better as about letting go of everything that isn't you, all of the expectations and all the beliefs, and becoming who you are. So thank you very much. I will answer any questions you guys have if you have any other questions.
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate it, especially because the day of the event, I didn't really get to focus on the actual practice as much as I wanted to, because I was kind of multitasking between other things. So this was really nice.
Great. Well, I'm glad it's helpful for you, and hopefully other people can find value in it as well. So is that it? I'm a little bit early. I must have talked fast again today. Normally I'm rushing at the end, like, oh my gosh, there's so much time left, or there's not enough time left. But
no, it was great. It was a really good overview. I enjoyed it, and I'm glad a couple other people were able to join us as well. So
yeah.
thank you so much.